Folks, we're winning. We're winning. We're winning.
The Trump presidency has been a bumpy road, but right now it appears that Trump is finally winning. Finally, he's starting to deliver to his base some of the things that he promised as part of his political campaign. Now, I'll tell you right now, Trump is my guy. I voted for him. I like him. I think he's a great president, perhaps the greatest of my lifetime. I expected him to deliver great things, and I think that we're finally getting to the point where he's starting to deliver on some of those expectations. During this video, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why I think Donald Trump right now is blowing things out of the ballpark. Reason number 1. The first reason that I think Trump is absolutely killing it at this point is his Remain in Mexico policy. For those who are unfamiliar with this policy, basically what's been happening in our country is we're being invaded by massive groups of Central American migrant caravans. These caravans are counseled on how to exploit a loophole in our system by declaring themselves as refugees. None of these people are actually refugees from political violence in Central America, though. Instead, they claim refugee status, saying things like they're the victims of domestic violence or gang violence. Of course, our own country, the United States, is also rife with these same problems. We have a lot of gang violence in our country, some of the worst in the world, and domestic violence happens at, I assume, the same rate that it would in Central America. But because we signed some treaty that we had to deal with refugees during World War II in the Holocaust, we are now bound to take these people simply because they articulate some vague threat of violence they face in their home country. Well, no more. Under Remain in Mexico, they have to stay in Mexico. Now, of course, the ACLU, the lawyers, the mainstream media journalists went absolutely batshit insane when Trump proposed Remain in Mexico. They fought him tooth and nail, and they took the fight to the heart of Blue America. They filed their lawsuit in the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, and Trump won. He won the preliminary injunction. The Ninth Circuit has allowed Remain in Mexico to go into effect, and tens of thousands of migrants have already been sent back. But Trump knew that wasn't enough. There are hundreds of thousands of these illegal migrants in our country right now, and we need to get rid of not just some of them, but all of them. Trump understands that in order to get anything done, whether it be with the United States government or Mexico's government, you have to hit them in the wallet. The congressional leadership of our country, and likewise the leadership of Mexico, don't give a shit about problems that ordinary people face. What these countries are responsive to is what happens to their globalist corporations. That's because the global corporations control our Congress through congressional donations, and likewise control Mexico's government through whatever sort of corrupt means exist in that country. So Trump goes tit for tat. If you're not going to take all of these illegal migrants, then I'm going to impose a 5% tariff on all of your globalist corporation goods entering the United States. And of course, Mexico caves. Trump scores a huge victory. All of those migrants are going back. They have to go back. And if any more come, they'll have to go back. I love Trump's slogan, Make America Great Again, but I think he deserves a secondary slogan. And my advice for that slogan would be, they have to go back. Now, of course, this doesn't solve all the problems. What about all the people backpacking drugs across unsecured portions of the US-Mexican border? That brings me to the next thing I want to talk about. Reason number 2. The next reason why Trump is winning is his successful declaration of a national emergency at the US-Mexican border. This has freed up a ton of money that Trump can use to bolster border security. Although he's unlikely to receive the funds necessary to build an entire US-Mexican border wall, he will have enough that he can bolster the border, greatly expand it, and take other measures to improve our border security. This may not be the perfect solution, but it's the best thing that he possibly could come up with. Congress was completely unwilling to work with him in order to have this wall built. Even when both the House and the Senate were controlled by the Republican Party, Trump got no traction with the wall. So Trump looked for a way that he could still do something, and this national emergency declaration was the best thing that he was able to find. Like with Remain in Mexico, the ACLU, the Democrats, and all of those groups have been unable to undo the national declaration of an emergency. Even though the House and Senate vetoed the national emergency declaration, they weren't able to come up with a supermajority veto, and the national emergency declaration was failed to be overturned. Then Democrats filed a lawsuit in the DC Circuit Court trying to block the declaration of national emergency, and that failed too. Trump just keeps winning these lawsuits at this point. I think it's because judges are finally starting to get it. What's going on our border isn't right. It isn't fair, and the American people are sick of it, and Trump is trying to do something to help our country. By the time the election kicks into high gear in 2020, I suspect that there will be substantial contributions to the existing wall, and that Trump's pledge as part of his next 4 years would be to complete work on an entire US-Mexican border wall. While you could criticize him for not getting that accomplished in his first term, I would ask the following question. What president could possibly have done better than Trump? Trump's done more than any president in my lifetime to address this problem that's existed for decades and decades, and for which millions upon millions of people have lost their lives. I'm not going to fault Trump because to me it appears he's doing everything at all possible in his power to get this done. He's not doing it because this is going to make him friends with other politicians. He's doing it because he believes that it's right. Reason number 3. The third reason that Trump is winning right now is the fact that the Robert Mueller investigation has concluded and has found that Donald Trump did not conclude with Russia during the election in 2016. This is a huge victory for Trump because for years now at this point, the mainstream media has made this the #1 story. Every day, the news media has reported that Donald Trump was on the brink of being impeached out of office, that there would be some breaking new development in the Mueller report, and that would mean that Trump's presidency would be absolutely done for.
Today was a turning point.
A turning point.
We're at a turning point here.
The beginning of the end for the Trump presidency.
The beginning of the end.
And breaking news.
We have another bombshell.
Mike Pence might have to assume the office of the presidency.
The call for impeachment.
Rumblings of the word impeachment.
Breaking news.
Another bombshell out of the White House.
I believe this is the beginning of the end.
I do too.
It's really the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end.
He may be feeling the walls closing in on him.
All the walls closing in on him.
The walls closing in on him.
Breaking news, a new bombshell.
One astrologer says this means the beginning of the end for President Donald Trump.
The beginning of the end of the Trump presidency.
Trump will resign.
The Robert Mueller report in fact revealed is that was complete bullshit. There was no evidence supporting the fact that Donald Trump had colluded with Russia during the election. This narrative that was pressed by the media day after day was complete and utter horseshit. It was all based on lies. The thing that I think is most hilarious is that some of the candidates running for the Democratic Party in 2020 actually agree with me on this. And during the Democratic debates, I bet they're going to be debating whether Trump should have been investigated at all. Some of the Democratic candidates are going to say that this was nothing but a conspiracy theory. And it's going to be absolutely hilarious watching the Democratic candidates defend Trump during the primary debates. Assuming whoever gets the Democratic nomination supports the conspiracy theories against Trump, he can attack them by pointing out that other people from his own party who were running for president thought that these allegations were bullshit. And if one of the Democratic contenders, like Tulsi Gabbard, ends up with the nomination, that would be the most hilarious of all, because then both Trump and the Democratic challenger would both agree that the Robert Mueller investigation was complete bullshit. And that would mean all of these left-wing journalists would have to eat their own shit sandwich. They would have to admit that everything they've been reporting on for years was a bunch of lies and bullshit. If you can't tell, I'm very much looking forward to watching the Democratic debates during this election. I think they are going to be absolutely hilarious. This whole Robert Mueller investigation is just going to give Trump a huge boost going into the 2020 election. Reason number 4. The fourth reason that Trump is absolutely winning right now is the trade war with China. When Trump first said that he was going to raise tariffs on China, the media went absolutely berserk. Every day I'd pull up the headlines and see apocalyptic news stories predicting that as soon as the tariffs were going to be imposed on China, that the United States economy would fold like a paper bag. And every time that Trump raised tariffs, and they've been raised several times again and again at this point, nothing really major happened with the economy. It appears to be just as strong as it was before all these tariffs were imposed. All I can gather from this is that the news media was not being honest about the effect that this trade war would have on the economy. The other thing I take away from it is that Trump was right. He's largely been vindicated at this point. You can raise tariffs on Chinese goods in protest of their unfair practices, and it will not destroy the United States' economy. That's abundantly clear. In some ways, it makes perfect sense. Something like 97-98% of Americans are not going to be owners of global corporations. To an average person who just goes and works a job, the fact that a trade tariff on goods being imported into the United States is not going to affect their livelihood. Only globalist corporations really need to be concerned about things like this. And I don't give a shit about globalist corporations. Reason number 5. The fifth reason that Donald Trump is absolutely winning at this point is there is no strong Democratic opponent. There is some ridiculous number, in excess of 20 different people trying to run to be the next Democratic challenger to Donald Trump. And none of them so far has established themselves as a truly great candidate. In the first couple of primary states, Iowa and New Hampshire, the two people who are polling the highest are Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. These two particular candidates have an absolute garbage truckload worth of baggage. Joe Biden would be a horrible choice for the Democrats to choose. He is a massive hypocrite. Joe Biden announced his campaign in a commercial that focused on the rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Joe Biden repeated the lie that Donald Trump made a false equivocation between white supremacists and the people who were protesting the rally. In reality, Donald Trump had said that he condemned the white supremacists at the rally, but there were some people who attended who were fine people. And he was referring to people who were there not to promote some sort of white nationalist viewpoint, but because they opposed the removal of a Confederate statue, which was part of Charlottesville's history. The reason that Joe Biden is such a hypocrite is that he was a Southern Democrat. He supported segregation. He opposed civil rights. For him to take the high and mighty path on something like this is absolutely ridiculous. And the way that the modern media works, the way that our culture wars are going at this point, whoever ends up being the challenger to Trump is going to be pressured to take the position that Trump is a racist. And Joe Biden is not a good choice of a person to be delivering that message. Of course, there's the whole groping scandal. One of the major reasons the Democrats are going to give to vote for their candidate is that they will reopen an investigation into Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. This is something that many of the Democratic primary candidates have advocated doing. They want to either pack the Supreme Court to diminish the influence of Kavanaugh, or they want to wholesale reopen an investigation into him and somehow undo his choice as Supreme Court Justice. Once again, Joe Biden is a terrible person to campaign on this political position. He will look like a massive hypocrite if he starts calling on Brett Kavanaugh to be impeached as Supreme Court Justice because he inappropriately touched a woman. It appears that Joe Biden has inappropriately touched numerous women. Donald Trump will absolutely roast him with this fact. Even if Joe Biden chooses not to campaign on these sorts of promises, It cuts off his ability to criticize Trump for nominating Brett Kavanaugh to begin with. Again, he's the wrong sort of person to be delivering these types of messages. So Elizabeth Warren is even worse. Elizabeth Warren's rise to fame occurred at the same time as the Occupy Wall Street movement. The US had this terrible mortgage crisis where housing values plummeted because Wall Street banks realized that mortgage-backed securities were not as good as investments as they should have been. And a lot of people, especially Elizabeth Warren, accused Wall Street of having caused the crisis. Elizabeth Warren became a leading figure on the left, calling for more regulations of Wall Street. So to raise her profile as someone who really cares about this shit, really wants to regulate Wall Street to prevent a repeat of the housing crisis, Elizabeth Warren ends up working with the Obama administration. They proposed this thing called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is supposedly supposed to do some sort of thing that helps prevent this from happening in the future. Now, I've read some things about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it's not real clear to me what exactly they do that would prevent a second housing crisis, but that was the idea behind the agency. So the 2016 election rolls around, and everyone is expecting Elizabeth Warren to run. Her name is well known, and the country had just suffered this horrible housing problem, and it just seemed like a natural fit for someone like Elizabeth Warren to run. She could make regulating Wall Street part of her campaign platform, and that would probably resonate with a lot of people. Elizabeth Warren ultimately decides not to run for some bizarre reason. So what ends up happening is Bernie Sanders basically takes her place. He adopts her message. Throughout Bernie Sanders' campaign, he railed about how he was going to stand up to Wall Street and pass serious regulations. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, proved to be the exact opposite of this. She had a lot of close ties to Wall Street banks and gave secret speeches to them. What ends up happening during the 2016 election is that it's revealed by WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton's campaign conspired with a variety of figures, including journalists and members of the Democratic Party, to rig the Democratic primary election to guarantee Hillary Clinton's victory. And even after this revelation, Elizabeth Warren ends up endorsing Hillary Clinton. It makes absolutely no sense and reveals her to be a complete hypocrite. I was dumbfounded when I read about the endorsement, and I don't know why anyone would ever trust Elizabeth Warren for anything after that. I certainly don't. That wasn't embarrassing enough. Elizabeth Warren had claimed Native American ancestry when she applied to work for Harvard Law School. She humiliated herself by posting her own DNA results in order to defend attacks from Donald Trump mocking her as Pocahontas. Unfortunately, the DNA results proved the exact opposite. Elizabeth Warren had fewer Native American genes than the average white person did in the United States. If the Democrats end up going with Elizabeth Warren, she will get utterly destroyed in the debates by Trump. Hands down, it'll be no contest. I was shocked when she even announced she was running after how humiliating and embarrassing the whole DNA test results thing turned out for her. People on the left didn't really seem real fond of her at that point either. After all, the left considers minority status to be some sort of sacred thing. By doing what Elizabeth Warren did, she proved herself to be a heretic, according to these leftists. I think Donald Trump is going to win huge in 2020. I think he's doing a great job despite a massive amount of opposition that he's been facing. And I'm real eager to see the Democrats self-destruct themselves in these Democratic primary debates. I think it's going to be absolutely hilarious. Well, if you like this video, keep the following in mind. I made this shit for you for free. You owe me something at this point. Why don't you go ahead and click that subscribe button.